Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca.
Hello, friends. I am Cindy Thompson, and this is a Resilience Project. This is a space where stories are shared and possibilities are discovered. I invite you to partner with me in cultivating resilience among humans, one conversation at a time. I am very excited to introduce you to Karen Alcantara. Karen describes herself as a combination of British Canadian tradition combined with a passionately kind Dominican influence. She is a support worker in the anti-violence sector, supporting women and gender-diverse individuals who are healing from various life experiences. She has worked in the housing sector in the downtown east side of Vancouver, is currently employed at the Women Against Violence Against Women Rape Crisis Centre in Vancouver, and is part of an advisory committee for the UN Women's Initiative to create safer cities. Karen would say she has drawn to this work as a daughter of an immigrant woman from the Dominican Republic, as well as an ancestral family of strength and pain through the experience of poverty. Growing up in Canada, Karen's older brother was a Black man in North America, which she believes led the two of them down the path of gang life. Reflecting on how, having lived a very dangerous lifestyle, Karen believes it is her personal story that has provided her with the compassion and understanding of those she now supports. Karen Alcantara, thank you so much for joining me here today and spending a bit of time in conversation to share your story of resilience.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And I just love that I get to meet someone like yourself who we might not otherwise come in contact. Maybe let's go back to growing up in the Dominican Republic and your journey immigrating to Canada and some of the experiences that you can think of as pivotal in your life.
Yeah, I was born in the Dominican to a mother of 12 children, and we're from a city, an outskirt of a city that is what we would call a barrio. In English, I think, I'm not sure, the translation might be shanty town. How I describe it to people is like we're from dirt floors and steel walls. And my mother's upbringing was even at a lower poverty scale than that. So we immigrated here when I was about 1 year old to a father who's from Canada, but has heritage from England. So the contrast is outer worldly, basically.
I bet.
My mom, every Thursday was like, we're eating with our hands today. And my dad was like, you can't have your elbows on the table. And, when we came to Canada with myself and my older brother, who my father adopted, my mom had a son previous to him. We were living in Calgary in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I feel like there was a lot of race, social economic class, lots of different things happening all at the same time. My mother is a woman of color and I am white passing. The three of us together make quite a combination. And I think that experience has never really left me, in the sense that you sort of grow older and don't really realize that your experience is something different than somebody else's because you're not really aware. And then as you get older and you start to witness other people's home life, or you start talking to people about what their experiences were, then you start to realize how different yours was. And then when we got to Canada, my mom and dad had 3 other children. So there was 5 of us in the house. And although maybe common a few years ago, or, some time ago, it's not quite common anymore. And so I think it's a lot in a household, on top of the fact that we're dealing with a lot of different cultural clashes and norms. And, my mom didn't acclimatize to Canada the way that many have. And so she left quite a bit. And so we were sort of alone-ish in a house with 5 children. And my father, working all the time to provide, was not around as often. And that left myself and all of us in different ways having to care for ourselves and take care of ourselves. And my older brother, who are the oldest, male and female, took on a lot of different roles at a very young age.
So would that have been through your teenage years then, Karen?
You know what? It was more or less throughout in different capacities. I remember one time when I was like 12, my dad came into the kitchen and was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm making the lunches." And he was like, "What do you mean?" "Well, who else will make them?" And then he offered to pay for me to do it, $2 a week or something. I don't know, you're like 10 or 11. And I remember in my head laughing, going like, "Well, this guy's going to pay me for something I'm already doing." But that moment really stuck with me because of the payment. But when you reflect back as an adult, you're like, why was a 12-year-old making 5 people's lunches to go to school? And why was their parent not aware that that was happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me wonder too, what was that like to have mom gone so much? Like, I'm imagining you must have really missed her if she was going back home quite a bit.
Yeah. I think that recently during COVID, some of us who have the access to the space have had valuable abilities to have conversations with ourselves and with our pains and traumas that we carry through us. And I think I've been reflecting a lot on how that's made me feel. I definitely have a lot of abandonment issues, and I think a lot of my siblings do as well. But then again, we've also had this opportunity to reflect on going to the Dominican Republic so much. I've gone every year since I turned 21. And living and experiencing the life that my mother had to go through and survive. And then to have this expectation that a Canadian household has, you can't mix that. And so at one point you have to understand and validate your pain. And then the other part, you have to understand like this was not something that she perhaps was ever capable of doing. And so that's been sort of the new revelations about how that was feeling in my childhood. Yeah.
Yeah, a really interesting point. We can't compare. And like you said, with what your mom would have learned growing up in the Dominican and what she would have seen and maybe how families were raised and what was important in their culture to then overlay that with growing up in Canada and what we might expect of families here. But it isn't till you're much older that you can maybe even reflect on that.
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite lines that I've been using a lot lately in my support work, which has been part of the reason why I've become an emotional support worker and really been able to empathize with people, is because of her, because of that cultural upbringing that she had, that you share and you love everybody and you never eat with it unless someone else is eating. And it doesn't matter about material things. And that has allowed me the access to really meet people where they're at. But I always be like, why can't you just be normal? And she'd say, no one's normal. Some people are just better at hiding it.
That sounds like a great bumper sticker right there.
Right?
Yeah.
Definitely one to remember.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've had some conversations with mom about this along the way also.
Yeah. She recently left her partner, and my sister and I supported her and took care of her in this past little while until she went actually back to the Dominican. She's there now. And it was beautiful. And she told me her story. And it was something that I had not known before. We are from a very poor country, and specifically a very poor family. And a lot of my aunts and uncles have done things that perhaps don't feel morally acceptable. But when she describes the reasons in which why she had these life experiences or why she did the things she had to, you can't fault her for that. And it really gave me an opportunity to see her for somebody that has really survived a lot of different things and still has the most beautiful smile on her face and still can love everybody and forgive everybody. And, that was really powerful and important and helpful for myself and for my sister. Yeah.
Well, that makes me remember another conversation I had with another guest about intergenerational resilience. And although we have to navigate adversity as we are growing and at different stages in life, there's a lot to be learned from our ancestors and what they have come through and what they might have to teach us as well. And that sounds like that's right on cue with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that, my grandma was a fierce human being. I mean, she was a shaman in the Dominican Republic and a healer. And the same thing, like I think about her, she had her first child at like 12, I think, 12 children on top of 3 children from my grandpa's previous marriage. And at her funeral, they like shut city blocks down. There were so many people that went because she just took care of everybody. And that passed to my mom to me, and then so when people say, where do you come to this work from? I come to this work from my ancestors.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's really important and how honoring as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Would you like to jump into a bit more around adolescence, growing up? Making sandwiches, I think, were just a small part of that, just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. When you asked about the repercussions of not having my mom there, I think that in my adolescence year, I was about 16, and I had to go through the whole puberty, menstruation, bra, boys alone. And I was just so fed up. And I think that there's a location or an atmosphere or community in an inner city like Burnaby, where I grew up, but also in Vancouver, where adolescents who are in pain have a really easy access to risky behavior. And I jumped right into that risky behavior from all of that pain. I just couldn't deal with, and I guess I didn't really have the tools, and my dad didn't really have a lot of time to really recognize how quickly it was going. And so, I was involved in gang life. My older brother, also being a Black man, was sort of labeled quite quickly. And so he followed into the steps of that as well. And first time I went out to a party, someone was like, "You're Angela Corbett's sister?" And I was, "Yeah." And all of a sudden it was like free entrance, free drinks, free this, free everything. And I was being like coddled in this way that I'd never felt acceptance before. And so it just sort of blew up in a way. And I got myself into a lot of trouble, not only for my own self, but I hurt a lot of people along the way. Yeah, because I was violent. And when you're doing things like selling drugs, you're hurting your community, you're giving people things and access to tools to continue hurting themselves. And so that was sort of a byproduct of that pain, although I don't want to blame anybody.
Sure.
I don't want to blame my mom particularly for that, but I also can understand myself and that my needs not being met as a child caused a significant amount of harm within me.
Can you look at that time and see that you were looking for something, a sense of belonging?
For sure. I've always been sensitive since the day I came out. I've always wanted to be where everybody else was. Yeah, the moment I got into this world where all of a sudden I was important and I was somebody to be taken care of, in a sense, from the older people and also from the younger people, somebody that I guess had some sort of reputation that I wasn't aware of and that I created for myself. And that did feel like a belonging. Had a lot of friends. I always was everywhere with people. I always was loyal to everybody, even when I was doing things that caused a lot of people harm. I mostly did it in the defense of somebody else. So yeah, I think you're right to accurately name it the belonging.
Yeah. Could you see what you were doing was not healthy, but out of desperation needed to be connected somewhere?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know what? I was scared a lot. We would get into fights where it was like a brawl. Like people would call people and then it would be a setup and you'd have to go to a park and everyone knew my name and that I was scary and I was this and I was that. And so I had this like expectation and I knew that it wasn't me, but yet I also was so afraid of being pushed aside or not thought of as this way that finally I felt like I belonged somewhere, that I would show up. And it was almost like the adrenaline rush of that is like, you can't even think twice about your own feelings. But I certainly knew it was very wrong. And specifically, I knew how much it was hurting my siblings because I was not engaging with them in a way that I had normally done so, which was, being their sort of maternal caretaker and caring about their feelings and asking them how they are. And I think that hurt the most because I was witnessing the pain that I was causing, my little brother, my little sister, my younger brother, even so. And my dad, he was always been my biggest cheerleader. And I think he was really scared, hurt, afraid, all of the things. And you know what they say, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. It's got to be the worst thing.
Yes, I'm sure you heard that. Well, what I hear when you say that is just as a teenager, the persona, the being on stage is part of the developmental stages of adolescence where you try to act a certain way to fit in. Well, that was to quite an extreme. And yet being a sensitive person, I can't imagine what that was like to be that scared, to have to face those kinds of challenges in order to maintain a persona.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the first times somebody walked up to me because the police were coming and they're like, hold my knife for me. I was like, who holds a knife for somebody? But I did it. And I just stood there and put it in my pocket. And I was like, okay, this is happening. I hope the cops don't talk to me. As I got older and have left that life behind, I remember the last time somebody called me to do something for them is like, go and pick up a box somewhere. And I was like, I can't believe you could ask me to do that. And he was like, well, no, we're friends. Come on, I'll pay. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that at all. But that boundary wasn't created until I had space and time and self-esteem and frontal lobe starts to grow in and you start thinking the future. But yeah, it was difficult to listen to my own self, but also really want and desire to be in this space with other people who I thought were really cool or really important.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What was it that helped you maybe move out of the gang life and some of those activities that you were involved with?
You know, I have always had a deep desire to help people. And I think that understanding that this was not going to get me anywhere that I even wanted to be. I really hurt somebody one year in the summertime and I felt really bad about it, really bad. And not to say that that person probably felt worse. And my dad sent me away to England for the summer just to help my aunt and uncle move. And then I realized that I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I started doing lifeguarding, which I always loved to swim. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to go to school and pursue being a therapist, actually, is what I initially wanted to do. And it just sort of stopped one day, which is bizarre. But now when you meet me or other people meet me, they're like, what? You did those things? I'm like, I know.
Yes. Well, to me, it's also a message of hope because sometimes parents are so worried about their kids when they are in the prime of adolescence. They might be making some difficult choices or some wrong choices, but they're all surviving the best way they know how. And it's a time where parents worry the most. But if we could just paint a picture for someone like you down the road that you turn out just lovely and you end up helping a lot of people, if we could just see that vision for down the road of how our kids will be when we worry about them the most.
Oh, for sure. You know, that's one of the reasons why I love working with youth. I believe that, you know, youth are our future. And whenever I see or hear of something where somebody got arrested at 16 and they get put into that jail life, you can never give up on somebody in their adolescence, because I am living proof that had my life gotten to that point, I could have been a completely different person. But had someone believed in me, you know, the way that my dad did and the way that others did, and kept trying, you know, I think that one of the things that I tell a lot of the parents that I talk to who have youth in risky behavior, I'm like, if they trust you and they're talking to you, that's good. Don't shame anybody. Don't tell them this or that. If they're able to speak with you and tell you honestly how they're feeling, which that means they trust you. And that's really an important part of a relationship with a youth and with somebody in an authority position or a parent. But yeah, no, not giving up, I think, is the best advice, solution I could say to anybody.
Is there anything anybody could have done when you were 16 and involved with that?
You know, I think about this often. My group of friends, we all came from like single parent homes, mine being the only male. And, you know, we were all sort of living within these sorts of experiences of trauma. And there was a teacher who told someone else who started hanging out with us, like, oh, don't hang out with those girls, they're bad. And initially when you hear that, you think, oh yeah, that's probably the best road of action. It's like, no, if you're a teacher and there's a group of people who are hurting, you should go and talk to them and ask them what's going on. And I think that in a public school system, it's difficult. And I understand there's so many kids and it's all happening so quickly. And, the issues happening in a youth is also like systemic and societal. And so how can we put all of that on our teachers? But at the same time, like, if you have the ability and the access to ask somebody like what's going on and to really care about them, I think that's why sports is so important, because there's a coach. There are more parents. There are more adults. And I think that's really valuable. And not to say that we need to put any more on our teachers because they are our heroes, but not having those negative cognitions about people, especially someone who is basically a child, I think is really something that could have helped me for sure.
Yeah. So I can hear just not labeling, being aware of our biases and the language we use and how that could impact how that person experiences that relationship, when just even taking a few minutes to find out, how are you really? You can hear often in success stories, it was a teacher or someone very influential in that person's life that just became pivotal in changing the course of that person's journey.
Yeah, I had a principal in my last 2 years of school. I got taken out of public school into private school. And he just cared about me. He just said to me, Karen, I saw you as this little sheep and I was your shepherd. And he made sure I was going to class. He checked out on me. He did so many different things. And I will forever be grateful for that care and attention. I mean, I probably didn't listen to half of it, but the fact that, somebody is there is really important.
Very cool. I'm glad that you highlighted that. So draw some lines between those early experiences and how that maybe has helped you design these next stages in your life.
Yeah. I think that as much as being a child and, doing your very best to emotionally support an entire family alongside, my brother and my dad and sometimes my mom, that helping mentality has always been like inherent within me. And there were some times where I thought I didn't want this, sympathetic, empathetic people always say, I'm sure at a certain point in their life that this big heart is not for me, But after a long time of trying to pretend that going to school or that being a therapist wasn't part of my life, I went back to school at 28. And now I'm 6 years into the career change and goal, and I just had a promotion within a rape crisis center in Vancouver, and I'm on the UN Safe Cities committee, and all these things are happening, and I'm kind of like sitting here baffled as this little ghetto girl. But that I was just honest with my own self, my own personality, the things that are just come naturally to me. I always say to people, you're good at math, I'm good at emotions, and those are my talents. And so I've kind of carried that along with me, and being the eldest sibling of my siblings has really allowed me to reflect on being a leader. And I think that that's helped me with all of my clients, that I don't pass judgment, and I didn't want to pass judgment on my siblings. And I really focused that on my clients as well. And I think that makes people feel really at ease. And I think it's important to see people however they come in whatever capacity. And that chaotic lifestyle has really helped me throughout that. And when I was in the shelter in the downtown east side, all my girls were like, for whatever reason, they just felt like I didn't belong there. And then 2 days later, they're like, can Karen help me with this? Can Karen help me with that? Where's Karen? La, la, la. And because I just see people. I like to hang. I would be in the back sitting on the floor with them while they're all sitting in their beds, braiding their hair. And everyone's like, is that staff? And I'm like, oh yeah, hi. Like, do you need something? Can I get you anything? And, that sort of attitude of being in a family aspect has really influenced my support work.
That's really powerful. I love that you just see people as people first. And those experiences, you refer to yourself as this ghetto child. And maybe when you come from so little, you're not judging somebody who comes from very little, like working in the shelter and helping those who are homeless. You just see them as people. And that big heart is really coming in handy just to be connected as humans first.
Yeah, I understand that we all sort of have our own like social bubbles or understandings or ideas about different things. But when you start to see people as people, no matter where it is, walking down the street, whatever it might be, I think it's part of the reason. I hope it can be part of the path of, unification, because yeah, I might not understand you or have all of your lived experiences. And I can't say that I would if you told me, but I can definitely be like, hi, how are you? You're hungry. Are you tired? All of these natural, normal, constant things that we all experience. Like we can understand each other at least in some level. And specifically, with the folks in the downtown east side, like they really deserve that because they're people, but also they really, really respond and love that because so many of us walk past them as if they don't exist. And I understand that sometimes you can have a negative experience with somebody who's going through something down there, but truly and honestly, like saying hi, it puts them in a place where they feel like, yeah, I'm here too, I'm seen. And so I think that's really an important piece if anybody wants to hear it.
What is it about this work, Karen, that it brings for you? What is it that draws you to this work?
Yeah, we asked that in a staff meeting yesterday. What is it? Like, where does it come from? I think, what? I love being with people. I love people. I think they're so interesting. I love talking to people. My friends call me a friendosaurus, but everyone has such a unique story. And I think for me, like, I guess I'm a very good listener. And I suppose many people feel comfortable telling me things. And so I get almost this like really great, quote unquote, best version of people. And so I really enjoy that. I guess it's also like, when you go down to the Dominican Republic, everywhere you go, there's somebody and you're always with someone and talking to somebody and everyone eats together and laughs together and, is sad together. And I think that aspect of that Latino culture influences my desire to want to be around people. And then the other thing I think is I have a unique gift to carry heavy situations, I suppose, in a way that makes people feel safe. Not everybody has that. And I think for a long time, I thought to myself, oh, everybody can do everything. I hated that saying where it's just like, oh, you're unique. And I'm like, no, you can, if you want it, you can try. And when I started to work in the downtown east side, I thought to myself, no, not everybody can have this level of compassion and kindness and determination, even when it's really hard to support folks when they really need you.
Yeah. You know what? I was just thinking about after facing some of the things you went through as an adolescent, and we haven't heard the stories, but I can only imagine some of the really intimidating situations you have found yourself in.
Yeah.
And maybe working in a shelter is nothing in comparison. So you've already faced some big fears that maybe that also created some space for you to be able to do this work with the people that really need it the most.
Yeah, like after I reflect on it, I do think that a little bit to myself. Sometimes when I come home and I would tell my partner about my day or something that happened, he would just be like, what? And I'm like, oh, whatever. But I think that, yeah, as you like change, I guess, or grow, and specifically for me, like change in such a dramatic way, I guess you always carry those things. I try and call my feminism like hood feminism, or like I'm a little hood rat, but I try and speak professionally as much as possible. But you're right, it has really informed me and made me feel less afraid, I suppose. I remember one time, one of my girls, I thought she was going to hit me, and I thought in my head, well, at least I'll get to go home early from work. And someone was like, that's sick. And I'm like, she didn't mean it. She's going to do it. She's just having a moment. And I don't know. I guess, yeah, you're right. I didn't feel the same fears as other people. And I think that's likely because of the experiences that I've had in my past.
I wonder.
Yeah.
Could I just share with you what I was getting as you were speaking about the community in the Dominican Republic, and you walk down the street and people are around and sharing meals together. And when you talked about your teenage years, it was just the opposite in terms of your sense of community within family or home life. You found it in the community in your own way. But I also hear it in the work that you're doing, whether it's at the homeless shelter or helping those in the Rape Crisis Centre. You're finding community wherever you go. You're naturally drawn to that, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I guess to me, it's like you're happier when you're with others. I think that we've lost that a bit in like Canadian society because it's so large and like vast. your home can be so big, your neighbors can be so far, whereas in the Dominican, my family's house, there's 7 different families. They just keep building up and like over and you're never alone. And it feels, sometimes I guess in an individualist society, that's seen as a weakness, but I think that we're social creatures. We've always been together, we need each other to take care of each other. And yeah, I guess community therefore is really important to me.
It sure sounds like it. As I listen, I can just hear the energy around being with others and what that brings you. Can we pivot for a moment and talk about your brother, your older brother? Because I know that was a big loss for you.
Yeah. So my brother was 3.5-ish when I was born, and he named me. He wanted to name me Angela because his name was Angelo. And then my mom met a lady from Alberta named Karen and thought this was going to be a Canadian name. So he's really been like my sole partner, since day one. My mom told a story about him trapped in between leaving the airport and the like customs. And Angela was like, Karen's hungry. Karen needs this. Karen needs that. And my mom was 19 years old, freaking out in a different country. And it was Angela always to be like, where's Karen? Where is she doing? If you see any photos of us together, he's always touching me in some capacity, like we're together. So I think that immigrating to Canada was really difficult for him. Specifically, he's a Black man. And as you well know, all the stuff that's happening in the world right now, that's a very difficult location to be in America. He had lots of teachers tell him that he was supposed to be a juvenile delinquent. And my brother, he was literally the kindest human. Again, his funeral, people were outside the door. They couldn't even hear. They couldn't even be inside. It was so full that people were there. And he passed away at 22 years old,
Yeah.
So, such a just powerful, kind person. Not without their troubles. He was adopted and by my father, and he didn't really know his father. So there's abandonment issues there, coupled with, my mom also. But he was the heart and soul of our family, 150%. There's not one day that we don't all go by talking about him. And we lost him 13 years ago now. And yeah, it's been brutal ever since. It's just so weird. Like, people pass away and that's life. And I have definitely had to realize that and grow through that and, become resilient through that. But it doesn't mean that, those people that have impacted your life so much, it doesn't change that pain. I wrote a poem about time. They say like time heals everything. And it's like, is it healed or is it just like masked with other experiences, on top of it? But yeah, we still go to Tofino. He passed away in Tofino, and we go to Tofino every year. Him and all of his friends, so like 20 of us, for the past 13 years, go to celebrate him. And one of his friends is a great chef and makes us beautiful food. And, we all just get together and laugh and reminisce. And I don't know many people that would pass away who would have 20 people commit to September long weekend for 13 years together. So that just is a minuscule amount of the impact that he had on all of us.
Well, I almost hear about, as you speak about him, almost like he was a second dad.
Yes.
The way he looked out for you. And so to lose a big brother that has been that instrumental, I can only imagine the loss for you.
Yeah.
And a great testimony to his time on this earth, although young. I can hear what you guys have been through together, some of the things that maybe you connected on, even if it was during some troubled times as adolescents. But I can hear he always looked out for you.
Yeah, he did. I think when he was involved in his gang life, he was really upset that I had followed in that footsteps. And I think that that's a classic sibling situation where you're like, don't do what I'm doing because it's bad. But then also, how do you stop like a 15-year-old girl from doing these things that her older brother is doing, And I think that really hurt him in a lot of ways, because I think he was forced into that world from these like societal ideals, and that was not his personality. And yet to see me going into that lifestyle felt like a failure on his leadership. And so for a while he avoided me, and it was the most painful thing in my entire life, because we'd been like glue And then he was like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't want you to be around me, nothing. And that really laid the foundation for my leadership when I lost him, because I call myself the president and the vice president now. And I didn't want my siblings to ever feel like I didn't love them or that they weren't important or that I wanted to excommunicate them. As difficult as that has been, in the end, it's been worth it. Like my sister and I have a great relationship. My brothers, I think, respect me-ish. They don't always like to be told what to do, but it's been better to have open communication. You know, my brother, I think he felt so many feelings from not being where he wanted to be that he like shunned us from it. And I didn't always find that helpful for me, although I can't speak on behalf of my siblings.
But that's what shame does, I think, is we withdraw and we feel bad about our own actions, but he's in the middle of his own survival story as well, right? Yeah. Karen, were there some other pieces on your resilience that you hope to share today? I just wonder if there were some other aspects that are important that we give space to.
Yeah, I mean, what I would hope that anybody would get from my story is that, you know, there are pieces of ourselves that are really valuable and really true. And the longer you fray from them, I think the more you personally feel like, you know, you're not doing your best self. And that causes a whirlwind of other things. And the moment I started to realize that, I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm capable and it's going to be scary and it sucks. And I'm still in it. You know, I'm in my 4th year at SFU for psych. And I'm like 33 and I've been in classes with 17-year-olds. You know, I was like, I want this and I really want it. And I don't really care all of the other expectations or feelings that have come with me for such a long time. And so I've quit a really good job at a legal firm after being in the legal industry for 7 years without a job and instantly fell into these roles that I really love. And now I'm in a place where I feel like my work is valued and I love the clients that I work with and the organization that I'm with. And so it might seem impossible, but when you're truly authentic to yourself, it is.
Very well said.
Yeah.
And I can just hear how all of your experiences have come together to point you in this direction of your studies, pursuing further education around the work you want to do in this world. Perhaps it will be in helping create safe cities with the UN, whether it'll be the Rape Crisis Centre. No matter who you're coming in contact with, I can hear you are now bringing your authentic self to each interaction.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to every day, for sure.
It's a practice, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is a practice. Absolutely.
Just before we wrap up, Karen, if you were to think of maybe 2 or 3 key components to your resilience, what would you say have been pivotal for you?
A long time ago, my therapist said to me, do you love your friends? I'm like, yes. Are your friends amazing? Yes. Do your friends think you're amazing? I'm like, I guess so. So then aren't you good? And that really stuck with me, the like empathy that you give others, like to give to yourself. That has really helped me whenever shame comes in or complexities or my self-esteem. I really try and have empathy for myself and my situations. You know, I'm not very good at doing house things because I was never taught how. And so I try and really say, you know, you can learn this. I like to pick up on what other people do. I cleaning the kitchen in this certain way. You know, I didn't get taught how to do those things. I didn't get taught how to do laundry, and knock on wood, I still don't have to. My partner does it. But that empathy around understanding that these are the things, the tools that I have been given, and I can either learn more if that is important to me, or I can just, that's not something that I'm able to do. And that has been really helpful for me, and also in my emotional world of, you know, feeling guilty and embarrassed, shame around things that I have done to other people throughout my life as well.
I can hear that being a journey and something that you're trying to just catch when you notice that you're being hard on yourself, because we can't change the past.
No.
But in the meantime, all these really cool things are happening for you today. And I can hear the trajectory of your life now. And I'm so excited for the difference that you're going to make in this world, Karen.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely.
Important to hear from ones who, you know, you've done so much in your life, and that mentorship, and just, yeah, Thank you.
I mean it. And I hope that we'll get to keep in touch and hear about all of that you're going to be involved with down the road. So thanks for taking the time today. Let's keep in touch.
Yes, let's keep in touch. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. In hearing Karen share some of her lived experiences, I want to capture some of these rich insights. Whether it was her role as a daughter, a sister that was making lunches for her siblings, a gang member looking for a sense of belonging, or the emotional support worker, taking on the role of president and vice president when she lost her older brother 13 years ago. Karen has demonstrated a natural tendency to adapt and bounce back from each of these life experiences. Like so many parents raising a family as a single parent, I want to honor that her dad was navigating a very challenging time as well in their lives. There is such a strong connection between her Dominican heritage, the value of family, and embracing community. This is evidenced by her commitment to each client she works with, bringing a sense of humanity, kindness, and acceptance to each of their interactions. Drawing on these insights, Karen highlights the Latino cultural influence of her ancestors, seeking connection over isolation and finding her greatest happiness in community. Further to this, Karen is committed to a practice of remaining authentic to herself. Instead of criticizing herself for not knowing something, she reminds herself that these skills are still something she can learn. Although Karen refers to herself as a ghetto girl or hood rat, based on her teenage association and experiences, you can hear the transformation that has occurred as she finds value, meaning, and purpose in her career. I hope that parents of teens listening to this episode will find some comfort in knowing that maturity is working in your favor, and with the right conditions, that same youth that you worry about today may just surprise you in a few years. Having lived many lives in her 33 years, Karen can now think of herself as a plant mom, a dog mom, a fiance, an annoying older sister of 6, while embracing a mission to bring more interpersonal kindness to this world. This is a far cry from where she once was. I have a feeling the world is going to be benefiting from Karen's lived experiences, her insights and wisdom as she pursues a career in helping others. Here are the reflection questions from this episode that I invite you to consider. First of all, reflecting on your youth, what have you forgiven yourself for? Or what do you still need to forgive yourself for? Secondly, what individual or relationship has had the greatest influence on who you are today? Have you had a chance to acknowledge the impact they have had on your life and tell them? Thirdly, who do you need to forgive in order to set yourself free? Thank you for listening to this episode of A Resilience Project. We would not be doing this podcast without you. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story or is helping to build resilience in their community, please email me at cindy@aresilienceproject.com. In fact, email me either way. I would love to hear from you. My hope is to feature an episode periodically on your letters of resilience. I'm very interested in hearing your story of how you have tackled hard things and what worked for you. With your permission, I hope to share some of these stories along the way with our listeners. Also, check out my website, aresilienceproject.com, to learn more about our amazing guests. Your presence here is important because together we are cultivating a village of resilient individuals. You are creating a space for their stories to be shared and a sacred space for learning to occur. I also have a favor. I would love for you to go to your preferred podcast platform, rate and review the podcast so that we will know how we're doing. I also would like to express my gratitude to the amazing team of volunteers that have jumped on board to support this project. You will find each of those beautiful people on my website on the team page. As you go about this week, I invite you to think about one way that you can continue to grow your resilient muscle. What is one thing you can start with today? See you next week.
Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca